Hello, happy Tuesday. Today is December 10th. I just got home from running my Tuesday errands because like I said, I cut home early on Tuesdays. I am heating up some lunch because I do have therapy in like half an hour. Today, I don't really have that much planned today, but I think we might do either like 25 books I want to read in 2025 or like my top 2024 books. Or maybe we'll just do a sit and read with me. I'm not entirely sure. I don't even know if I'm going to put it in this video or again do it like where sometimes I split it and sometimes I put it into the vlogs. I have to figure it out. My house is a mess right there. Look at that. But that's life again. My kitchen is tidy right now. I really do want to wash my towels and I want to make dinner, but maybe I'll just stick to sandwiches tonight. So we will see where the day takes us. I think as of now, I'm just gonna sit and have lunch and do therapy so that we will chat later. Bye. So I didn't record almost anything at all today. I had a really rough therapy session today, and so I literally just lounged on the couch and read Magnolia Park's Long Way Home. Can we please talk about how crazy that book is? Like, how are there people who've read that book and are still okay? Like, I think I'm about at the halfway mark, and I can't say anything unless you've read the rest of the series, but I already felt that the first 100 pages were just like drop of tea and more tea and more tea and knowledge, and you're just like, it makes you view the whole series very differently. And now where I'm at, you're getting glimpses of things of like how Daisy's doing because you get Magnolia's perspective first and then you get Daisy. So it's just crazy because I'm getting Magnolia's perspective of what's going on with Daisy from the Daisy books, and then everything that's going on with everybody in the, what are they called, their little friend group. I forgot, they're called like the box something. Oh my god, like let me grab my book, give me 1 second, I'll grab it. So the book is, I don't want to like accidentally get a spoiler, but I am 524 pages. 524. And no, there's 524 pages in the book and I'm at 264. So I'm a little less than halfway, like 40 something percent. I read like 100 pages in an hour because it was so good. Like, man, I don't know what Jessica Hastings puts into these books. They are crack. Like, they're so addicting. I don't know. It's so good. So I wanted to sit down because I finally had the time to make a list of like my top books of 2024. Actually, I'm lying. I actually spend all year filling out a chart, I'll show you in my bullet journal, where I write down my favorite books of the year, but I just write any book that I really enjoyed. And I put a few extra here. Actually, they were supposed to be on this page originally. So see, I have a list, and it was originally 42 books long. This includes like individual books in a series. This includes just any other book that I've enjoyed. And so the list was pretty long to begin with. And I decided, I saw people online doing like top 24 books in 2024, and I thought that it wouldn't be that bad. I read about 150 books this year, so I was a little nervous because again, out of 150 books, 42 books I considered really good reads. And I was like, is it possible to actually bring it down to 24? And I did. I brought it down to 24 books. I even brought up 3 honorable mentions. Now the problem with this, and it's a little flawed, is the fact that I'm reading Long Way Home, and I'm also reading In 5 Years, which is supposed to be a highly rated book as well. So I guess it's not accounting for those books, and maybe I'll just include them in my next year's video of this. But as honorable mention, since I'm already halfway through this one, I will put this one in my top of 2024. Like, this book is so good. And if it ends up being amazing, and I'll just re-repeat it in 2025 because it's that good. Long Way Home has taken my heart, and it might be so far my favorite out of the first 3. I would order it as Long Way Home, original Magnolia Parks, and then Daisy Hates. Not because I don't like Daisy Hates. People like to pin the two. They're just very different. And I really enjoyed her books, like her perspectives in her books a lot. Like, you get Julian's perspective in her book, which was something that I loved. And I also loved getting Christian's perspective a lot. And I enjoy her, but I don't enjoy her as much as like reading about BJ and Magnolia. And then also getting like everybody from their crew. Like, I love Jonah, so like I get to read a lot about Jonah in this one, even if it's not from his perspective. So take that as you will. I will for sure put that in my top of the year, but I'm not going to put this on. This was not in my list because I didn't complete it, so I feel like it's kind of cheating. So I kind of clustered series together because I would have never been able to do it just as like individual books. So these are not in order either. This was technically from the order, like I was going through my list of favorites and I just wrote them down. So basically they're from like when I started reading the book and or series. So like January till now. So that's kind of the order they're in. It's not really in like a favorite. It's just, they're all my favorites. So as no surprise to anybody, I put Throne of Glass, they're right there, as my top series, or one of the top series that I read this year. I did read the original Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. at the end of 2023, but in 2024 I read from Era Fire, including The Assassin's Blade, onwards, and so it would have been basically all of those books in my top 24, which would have taken too many spaces. So Throne of Glass is number 1. Number 2, I put the Caraval trilogy, and you know why? I was sitting with this for a while. I don't think that series is the best series of all time. I really enjoyed it, and I also really liked its whimsical writing, and I was thinking about it like, why did I love this so much, even though the plot is just good? It's not great, it's good. And I figured it out. It is because I love the Cruel Prince trilogy, and the Cruel Prince trilogy by Holly Black is like this whimsical, very like war, strategic, like very like Game of Thrones-esque. I mean, YA version of Game of Thrones in terms of like, you know, trying to take the throne. And just the way that is not the plots are not similar at all. Don't go into Cruel Prince thinking they're like Carvel or vice versa. The writing is just very whimsical. The way that she writes the world out is just similar-ish. Like it gives me the same feeling, even though the plots aren't the same. And so even though I read the first one and I was like, wow, this is such a magical thing. It's like a carnival, but like a magical carnival, but also with scavenger hunt themes to it, and it's kind of cool following like the same war characters basically throughout the whole series, and you become really attached by the end of it. I was sad. I know Spectacular came out, which is a Christmas novella. I have not read it yet because I have a paperback set, and so I have to buy it in paperback, so I might either get the audio, borrow the audio, or get the Kindle version first. So I will put the Caraval trilogy in my top of the year. Then I put Ready Player One. This is a sci-fi dystopian, not a fantasy. I would definitely put it in sci-fi dystopian fiction. It's really good. If you've seen the movie, you kind of know what it's about. It's like takes place in a future where people can get into this virtual universe with like a headset, and they go to school in it. They earn their money that way. They work. They have fun, and so the creator of this game creates a scavenger hunt, and there's a reward, and I don't remember if they tell you what the reward is or not, but basically once he passes away, everyone in the world goes searching to try to solve his riddle, and it follows Wade, who is a high school student, and it's really fun. The found family is super cool. The world itself is very creative. I watched the movie first, so it was kind of cool to get an idea of what the world kind of sort of should look like, even though they're not the same, and the book is way better. I liked it because it kind of gave me an idea of like, wow, you could create any character that has already been created. You could even be that character, or use the power-ups or use the powers from other video games, and they put them in there. And if you are a lover of video games, you would love this book. If you like sci-fi, you would like this book. I really enjoyed it. I did read the second one. I didn't love it as much, but the first book is definitely a favorite for me. Then, as no surprise to anybody, so I read Magnolia Parks, the original one, in 2023. I read Daisy Hates, and Daisy Hates definitely is in one of my top books of the year for the same reason. You already find out, so for people who don't know, Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates, you're supposed to read them in the order they release, but Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates take place at the same time, but following different perspectives. So like you read the original Magnolia Park series, and then basically you go back in time and you read the same current events through Daisy Hates perspectives, and it's interesting because they are not part of the same friend group. They're just both like high society people who are under the public eye a lot for different reasons, and so it's cool to see like random scenes that happen in Magnolia Parks in Daisy Hates and her perspective on the whole thing, and vice versa. And I don't know, I just really liked it. Jessica Hastings has a way with word. I love gang styled themed books when done well, and this one was one that was done very well. I love Christian. I want to know more. I know, so we have two Daisy Hates books out so far, and I believe we're expecting 2 more according to what she said in the future. And I know some people do a tandem read. I did not read it in tandem. Maybe if I were to do a reread, I would do a tandem read. I know, baby. I know. So I did not read it in tandem, but maybe that's a cool way to do it. There's like a chart online where you could do it similar to like Throne of Glass, and so I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Then, oh, one more quick note. I do want to mention the fact that Daisy Hates, if you liked, and Magnolia Parks in general, if you like Gossip Girl and you like drama and you just like, I don't know, if you like the drama and you loved Gossip Girl, you would love this series, because that's what it reminds me of. It's just rich people in London versus rich people in New York. And like, they're not in high school, they're adults. Like, only Daisy's in college. Everyone else is having real jobs. So that kind of gives you an idea, like, they're models, they're doing their work lives, wealthy people people living their lives wearing very fancy clothing. So I definitely recommend it if you're interested in Gossip Girl specifically, the original. Then this year I read The 7-Year Slip and I loved it. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I did read her other series, The Dead Romantics, I think about a year ago, and I really enjoyed it as like a fun romance with magical realism in it. And so when everyone was raving about The 7-Year Slip, I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and you get nervous when people hype up a book so much and you're just not sure if you're gonna love it. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that I waited for a moment where I was like, okay, I need like a good book, or a book that I think is gonna be good. So then I loved it. I feel like I was a little surprised that it was a little bit heavier than I expected it to be. It dealt a lot with grief, and the way that she describes grief was so beautiful. I feel like it's true that these memories never leave you and they haunt you forever, and this was somebody who she was really close to, the main character, and so it was just it was a special read. The romance in it was also really touching, and I didn't really expect it to hit as hard as it did, and I loved it. I ended up buying a secondhand, like a resell version of the book. Let me see if I can even find it. This one. Look how beautiful this is with these lemons right here. I was obsessed, and I actually have the original one that I have annotated, but this one is just so beautiful. I love it. If you haven't read it yet, please give it a read. It was so good. Next up, I have Abby Jimenez's newest release, Just for the Summer. There are very few authors that I read their releases just as they come out every year, and she is one of them. She always has these books that deal with these really heavy topics that I always enjoy, and this one was no different. I feel like her books are just so good, and Justin as a character is one of the ultimate book boyfriends. I mean, I say that about a lot. There is a long list of book boyfriends, and I should make a list of like my favorite book boyfriends of all time, but he is one of them. His acts of service, his quality time, the way that he is so thoughtful and generous and just like is willing to be there, it's so nice. And then also he's there for her during like very difficult times in the book. I definitely recommend, I don't always say this because most of her books are standalone, but I will say you should read like The Part of Your World and Yours Truly, and then this one. They are technically part of a like series. They're standalones, but the books will hit a little bit harder because they do bring back characters from older books in this one specifically, where it actually kind of matters. So I would say please go into this and read Part of Your World. It's not my favorite of her books. It's a good book, but it's just like for me, a very normal romance. It doesn't hit as hard as some of her other books, but this one was so good. It was so enjoyable. I breezed through it. I think this was a buddy read with my friend Christina, and we both loved it. So highly recommend that one. Then I have Funny Story. Again, another author that I just constantly read her releases almost immediately as they come out. Sometimes I get a little nervous because they're just so good, and I feel like she always hits me so hard. I'm always like crying by the end of her books, and I loved Funny Story. Funny Story was definitely a little bit more rom-com-y. I would say it leans a little more of like, I don't know, it's a little more rom-com-y, but the way that she writes dialogue and locations and people, it's a talent. Not everyone has that. Like how does she write these rom-coms? Funny Story for me is a rom-com, and she still writes it in a way where it comes across as literary fiction. It is so unique and so talented. I know everyone loves Emily Henry and everyone raves about her writing, but there's a reason for it. She is actually that good. My tiers will always be Happy Place and Beach Read for number 1. Maybe I would put Funny Story in second if the other two in first place. And then do People We Meet on Vacation, and for me Book Lovers goes on the bottom. It was the least special book. It was missing something that the other ones just had, that magical touch. Not that it was bad, because her books, none of them are bad, but it was, not as magical. I definitely recommend this one. It's super fun. It's kind of funny because I feel like it kind of sort of gave me another book I was reading, and I mentioned this before, and I can't put, when I read it I was like, wow, this reminds me of a book I just read. But now that it's been so many months and I've read so many books, I can't put my finger on it. Then I have Dune. Dune is a sci-fi fantasy, and if anyone's watched the first 2 movies, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. I actually watched the movies first, and I'm glad I did because it kind of gave me an idea of how to pronounce the names of the places, the people. I also got an idea of how to picture the world a little bit because that book is a chunky book. A lot of details. I switched between reading it physically and listening to it, and I'm glad I did it that way because sometimes I would listen and read it. It is a lot of information information. It is a heavy book, but I will say it is so good. And you read that book and you could see how other like fantasy books or like sci-fi books got like the blueprint from Dune. It is a phenomenal work of art. Like, I don't think it's for everyone. It's a little, like I said, it's a little tedious compared to other fantasy. The writing is not as simple. You definitely have to pay attention because there's a lot of phrases that he made up and words that he made up and people with very similar sounding names, but they're different. But it's just so, it was an amazing read and I definitely can't wait. I think I'm going to try to read the second one in 2025. I think it's called Dune Messiah and I recommend it. It was one of my favorite reads for the year. Then surprisingly, I put Annie Bot. Maybe it's not as surprising because I mentioned I think Annie Bot in my channel at least once or twice this year. It is a sci-fi book. I received it from Book of the Month and it follows a robot named Annie who receives autonomy. So originally these robots were just meant to do like basic cleaning, basic sex work, basic, what's the other one? There was 3 versions of them. It was like housework, oh, and nanny, housework, sex, and nanny. And so when they are granted autonomy, they could create like hybrids and then from there they kind of like learn on their own. And it's her journey going from just being a normal robot with just normal duties to learning about the world, creating her own opinions, and just learning as if she's a child but in kind of an adult's body, but also under the command of her owner who bought her. It is chilling. It gives me Black Mirror kind of, but like you're reading from the perspective of the robot, not from the human. And so it was just a really great read. It, you know, there was some scenes that were a little uncomfortable, so I would look up if there's certain things that you know you might be triggered by, look into it. But it was short and in those amount of pages she was able to do so much. I can't wait for her next release because I was really like pleasantly surprised by it. Then we have Face Off by Chelsea Curto. How many times am I going to mention this book? I think I've mentioned it in almost every single video that I've posted since August. Maybe not every single one, but a lot of them. It is a 2 professional hockey player romance. She is the only female hockey player in the league and he is one of the best and older team players in the league. They play on the same team. I love a good hockey romance, but this one definitely breaks the mold a little bit. It is very different from other hockey romances that I've read in the past, and it's kind of cool because it is part of the DC Star series. It is also part of the Love Through a Lens series. So like you see Mav and Emmy in multiple books between the 2 series. So it's pretty cool because you see them multiple times through both. And while they're not the focal point, it's always nice to see them again. If you want to see other information, you can go back on past videos because I've talked about this one a lot. Then I did You with a View by Jessica Joyce. This is my first book by her. First of all, I was in love with the cover. I saw that cover and I knew that I wanted to read it. And then I was pleasantly surprised when I saw all the highly rated reviews everywhere. And honestly, this is another great book that I read on grief this year. This one dealt with a girl who was sorting through her grandmother's things after she passed away and saw that she had like this crazy romance. And so she goes and posts a TikTok video basically hunting down this guy who used to date his grandmother back in the day. And so they meet up and of course the grandson of the grandfather is someone she either went to, I think it's someone she went to school with or I think she went to school with him and she kind of is like a little jealous of him. And so she ends up creating a great bond and friendship with the grandfather and they decide to go on this trip that her grandmother and the grandfather had planned when they were young and about to they were gonna run off and get married, like get hitched. And so it's kind of fun to see them go on this road trip together while she's recording it because they're all she's a photographer and the grandfather is also a photographer. And it's just nice. And like I said, her going through her grief while also going through this romance and creating this beautiful friendship is just a very special thing. And the way she touches upon all of these topics and emotions and even the settings that she creates in this book, it's very special. I liked it. And I also feel like it was a really nice slow burn to a romance too. Like I liked the friendship or strangers to friendship to lovers type vibe. So that was another one of my favorites and it really surprised me this year as well. Sorry, my camera died. I had to switch it out. Okay, so the next book on my list is Heartstopper. Specifically book number 4. I did finish 4 and 5, but I was a little disappointed by 5, so number 4 is the book that I would put on my list specifically, mainly because of the hard topics that it goes through. It was a nice chunky book. I expected it to be like super heartwarming and happy, and you know, the rest of those books I feel like they all dealt with the topic, but they were all like more lighthearted, and this one took a much heavier turn, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think as a book that is marketed towards YA or upper YA, I think it's really important to hit some of those really heavy topics, and they did it so well. You know, they really do such a good job of like going through the conflict and resolving it in a way that's mature and like also healthy for young people to see. I love Nick, and I love, is it Nick and, what are their names? Why am I hitting a blank right now? Nick and Charlie. I really love Nick and Charlie, and so it's always a pleasure to go back into that world with them and their friends and family. But this book was a really outstanding book. I'm kind of sad that the final book comes out. It should be coming out this winter. I don't know if it's coming out in December or January, but they said, I'm pretty sure that it was coming out very soon. So I'm kind of sad to see the conclusion to the Heartstopper series. The next book on the list is A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book is so special. I didn't really know what to expect while going into it. I think I thought it was going to be like a cheesy witch romance, when in reality it was just a cozy fall book about finding your found family and being a witch at the same time, because she is a witch. And I think it hits my top, not because of anything other than the fact that I just didn't know what to expect while going into it. I thought it was going to be something, like I said, completely different, and it was a lot heavier than I expected it to be. Yes, there is a romance, but I would consider it to be a literary fiction that happens to have magic in it and also happens to have a secondary like romance as a secondary plot line. So I highly recommend that one. And she was supposed to release a book earlier this year, but I think it got pushed to April, so I'm a little disappointed, but I'll be waiting, I guess. Then I have Savor It by Terry DeWitt, and I went back and forth deciding whether I was going to put Savor It, the co-op, or both of them, and I decided to do Savor It only because I feel like the co-op I feel like was predominantly a romance and learning to like heal as individuals, and while it was good, it was just like it didn't have that specialness that Savor had. Like, people went into Savor It, I think, thinking it was going to be like a true romance, and in reality I feel like it had a slow burn, but it also dealt a lot of grief and rediscovering yourself, and also like planting roots somewhere and kind of just healing. It was so beautiful, and I feel like maybe people didn't like it because it wasn't very plot heavy, like not that much happened. It was a lot of telling us about the healing and the thoughts of both perspectives. And so I know that's not for everyone, but I loved it. I ate it up. I mean, I'm not trying to say that the co-op was bad. It wasn't. It was still one of my top reads of the year. It's in my list. If you look at it, I think it's the last final book that I put on there as like one of my top reads, number 42 or 43 or however many books I have on the list. But Savor It was so good. And if you are into those kind of self-discovery type romances where there's slow burns and it's not just about the romance, I think you'll love it. Then we're gonna take it a full 180 and we're gonna talk about a manga that I started reading this year. I read the first 8 volumes this year, and it is Yona of the Dawn. Yona of the Dawn was highly recommended. What is it, by a Clockwork Reader? She's a YouTuber, and she has been raving about that series, I think, for the last 2 years that I've been watching her, and I kept putting it off, but maybe like 6 months ago, I was in the mood for a romance, and I decided to give it not a romance, an anime, a manga. Goodness, I was in the mood for a manga, so I decided to give Yona of the Dawn a try, and I fell in love. It had almost everything that you could look for. It had romance, it was funny, the found family was amazing, there was action, and there was high stakes. It had everything that you could envision, and so I fell in love with the series. I am not done, and I'm not sure if the series itself is done, but as of now I have been really enjoying it, and I look forward to finishing it up and continuing to read it. But as of now, the first 7 or 8 volumes that I've read, I highly recommend, and I had to add them to my top 24. Then we're on number 16 right now. I put The Rom-Commers by Catherine Senner. I love books about writers, all kinds of writers, screenwriters, regular authors, songwriters, and so people who write about words and wordplay, those books for me have always tended to be really good. I think it's why I liked what is it called, The Breakup? I was just talking about it. I think it's called The Breakup Pact. No, whatever. The Roughest Draft. That's why I love like so many books about like singers, and if they have to write down the lyrics, they're not always good. What makes them good is when they talk about the lyricism of it, or like I said, the wordplay. Like, something is very special about this, and The Rom-Commers is about 2 screenplays. One guy who is a famous screenwriter, one who is an amateur screenwriter who has been trying to make it as a screenwriter. bodyguard. And so she gets in contact with his agent and he says, oh, she needs, the guy screenwriter needs help because he is stuck. So he sends her, like the agent sends her a copy of this guy's latest screenplay and it is terrible. So the agent was like, okay, if you go to his house, you guys could work on it together and fix it. So she goes over there and of course she's surprised because he has no idea what she's doing there. But eventually they kind of make it work in a way where they're, you know, they're actually writing and changing and making the screenplay significantly better. And I loved it. Have enjoyed most of Catherine Setter's books. I've read every single book after The Bodyguard. And it's kind of funny because I feel like her books just tend to get better and better between releases. I still have to go through her backlog because I've heard that even her backlog is so amazing. She tends to do, I would say, literary fiction or women's fiction, but this one I would say is romance leaning. It's definitely a romance, but with a little extra plot that's not just romance, and that's what makes it a little special. I really enjoyed it. I don't even know what else to say. I can't wait for her newest release. I forget what it's called. She actually released like the cover, the name of it and everything, and I received an art. So I will be one of the first people to read that one, and I am thrilled. Number 17 is None of This Is True. I think this is the only thriller that made it on my list this year. This year, I will say, has been the year of disappointing thrillers. I have read so many of the newer releases. We've read in our book club Riley Sager's new release, and it was okay. And I read Jason, what is it? Jason Sulowski or whatever. I don't remember his name. I will put his covers here. And I wasn't really super into it. Something was definitely missing. It was good. It was fine. I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden and I liked it, but it's definitely not top 24 like vibes. And so None of This Is True definitely made the list. It was so good. I own it and I also listened to it. I'm glad I listened to it because of the full cast audio that they have. Like the way that they do it, because it's a book about a podcast, and so they do like the podcast and the interview style, and just it came together really well. And if you're looking for a good thriller, I think Lisa Jewell does a great job of storytelling, and this one is one of my favorites. I think I read 2 or 3 of her books and this is my favorite of hers, so I definitely recommend None of This Is True. Number 18 is Divine Rivals. I read this one last month and I understand why it won like a Goodreads award last year, was it? And then this year was Ruthless Vows. They just won. It is so good. It is a YA historical romance fantasy. I would say it's a historical fantasy. No, it's a historical romance fantasy. And so it takes place in this world where these 2 gods are at war. And so people are joining the war. And so there's a whole bunch of people in poverty, including our main character. And she originally finally gets her dream job to work at this newspaper, at least as an intern, while she is rivals with, what is his name? I'm so bad at names. Iris and Carver. Oh my god, what is his name? Roman. Okay. So she is a rivalry with Roman, who's also trying to get the same position, and things just kind of go from there. I don't want to give too much away. There isn't that much magical aspects to it, so if you're not into fantasy, I don't think it will really make that much of a difference to you. I think this definitely lands more in historical romance with magical realism elements, even though there's gods. Like, at least in this book, I didn't find that the magic really did that much. Like, there is one thing, but once, like I said, it's magical realism. It was like one element, kind of like Ashley Poston, the way that she does it, Poston. So I really enjoyed that one, though. I ate that one up and I read it with my friend, and I hope I like the second one just as much, so we'll see. Then I added Red Rising. Red Rising is a sci-fi dystopian, is what I would consider it. It is Hunger Games-esque. It was not what I expected it to be at all. It read really easily, though. I feel like it read like a fantasy, which is why I enjoyed it as much as I did. There are a lot of characters, a lot of description into like the world and the hierarchy of like the colors, and I really enjoyed it. I think there's like 7 books to this series, which is kind of nerve-wracking because the books are a little long and the words are not that big, but I'm taking it like slowly. I just hope that because I took so long to read now between the first and the second, I don't forget too much, is my hope. So we'll see what happens, but I really enjoyed it. If you want to get into sci-fi, I recommend this one. I recommend Ready Player One. I also recommend The Martian. I think those are good sci-fi books because they're kind of easy to read, actually. They're not, like when you think of sci-fi, I don't think of those books. Or maybe I do, but then I read them and I'm like, oh, like this is the sci-fi for me. And so that's what I would just call this, like the sci-fi for the non-sci-fi reader. Or Ender's Game, I would put in sci-fi as well. And I really enjoyed that one. I read that one in high school and I loved it. Okay, number 20 20, I put Between Us by, what is it, Mari McFarland. I'm sorry if I'm completely butchering that name, but I loved it. This gives me Emily Henry. It is literary fiction with romance. It had so many other things going on, and it was funny, and I also was surprised, and it was just a very entertaining read. Her books are short, which I also really liked. Like, I think I got through it so quickly. It was probably about 300 pages, and the words were not small, so that was really helpful. And overall, I really can't say too much about it, but it's just like following a girl and like her group of friends and what happens after a weekend away with them, and basically like I said, what ends up happening because of that. So that was like the start of the story, that they end up all going to this house in the woods-esque, and then from there, you know, things kind of happen. I definitely had predictions about how the book was going to go, and I think if you look through my annotations, you will see that I kind of nailed it like 100 bajillion%, so that was pretty exciting. Then for 21, I put Yellowface. Yellowface was not what I expected it to be at all. Like, I was reading the reviews and I expected it to be very challenging to read, but in reality it was very simplistic, and it just, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was like entertaining, and it made you feel disgust and frustration and angry and outrage, and I think that was 100% the point. It's about a white author and an Asian author who are best friends. I'm always so bad at names, so I'm so sorry. But what happens is, after a night of going to hang out with her Asian authors, oh my god, I'm gonna look it up. I think it's June and Athena. June. Oh, I was right. Wow, okay. This follows June, who's a white author, and Athena, who's an Asian author. And after June and Athena are hanging out one day, Athena says that she has her latest like what is it called, manuscript ready. And these girls have been in college together, like they have followed each other throughout their careers since college, and unfortunately June does not end up being successful, but Athena ends up being a huge hit. And then one day when they're hanging out, Athena starts choking, and instead of June helping her, she kind of just lets her be, and she passes away. Now she calls the police, and while she does so, she steals Athena's manuscript and puts it up as her own after she passes away. And obviously a whole bunch of stuff happens from there, and it's really interesting. So June is a super unlikable character from every perspective, every way. Like, there's no way to defend her actions or her thoughts or anything. She's really a shitty person, and she's written, I think, to be extremely unlikable. And then Athena, which is very interesting as well, which you would consider the victim, is also not the perfect, most likable character either. And so it's just an interesting look at the publishing industry, and just, I don't know, following these characters, you know. And it's like, who has the rights to tell certain stories, and just a whole bunch of other things. It was a very interesting read, and it really makes you think. I do think sometimes she hits the nail on the head really hard, as if, you know, the reader is not the most intelligent, but I will say I just still enjoyed it, and I thought it was a read that I think most people should, you know, give it a chance. Then I had Crazy Rich Asians. I actually watched the movie years and years ago, and I started reading the book, but then I moved and I just didn't touch it for a while. And so this year I decided to read it from the beginning again, and I read it so quickly. This gives me, again, it's another Gossip Girl-esque series, but a little bit more lighthearted, and it takes place in Singapore, and it's so good. If you've watched the movie, you know it is about an Asian American woman who ends up dating this guy who is like actually like Chinese, but like, you know, like his family is still from there, and she is an Asian American. And so he invites her to his best friend's wedding in Singapore, and so he goes, and then she finds out that he and his family are extremely wealthy. And then from there she deals with, you know, people not accepting her, not only for not being wealthy, but for not being like actually Chinese. Like, she's Chinese, but she's Chinese American, and all these people are first generation Chinese. And it's kind of like, it just goes from there, you know, dealing with family drama, friend drama, people not being the nicest, and it's really entertaining. There's 2 more books in the series, and I can't wait to see where it goes, because they just announced that they are going to go produce the second movie, and so I kind of want to get a head start and like read the book first and then go in. Now we're at 23, and I put 23. Wow, we're almost done. The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I love that book. It is I think about a 200-page book, and it literally just follows the story of a man. And this is another book that you would love if you love books. It's about a guy who lives on an island and runs a bookstore, and kind of how his life gets turned upside down after a strange turn of events, and how it makes him better for it, and just follows him on his journey, you know, through that. The plot isn't like the most exciting, but somehow it's just written in this way that just, I don't know, I was crying by the end of it, and it's a really beautiful story, you know. So that is another, I don't think I have it. Oh yeah, I do. I have it right here actually. But it's at the bottom because it's by Gabrielle Evans, so Z's at the bottom. This one. It is a super, super thin book. It's 258 pages, so less than 300 pages. You could read this in almost like a sitting. It was really fun. I honestly want to read Tomorrow Times 3, because obviously it's written by the same author, and I can't can't believe I haven't taken the time to do so, because if she could do that in less than 300 pages, I am so excited to see what she could do with more than that. Now, the final book on my list is The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. This is a YA LGBTQ plus book, and it is a coming of age. It's about a girl who is Hispanic, Mexican, if you want to be really specific, and she goes to a Catholic school, and her parents are separated. Her dad lives in Mexico, her mother lives in the United States with her and her brother, and they are struggling to hit ends meet, and it's just her trying to figure out her life, you know? She is a lesbian, and she is just trying to come to terms with that. She has a crush on this girl in her school. She is trying to, you know, help her mother with her business and make enough money for their business. They have like an Etsy shop where they create, I think, jewelry, it was like bracelets and stuff. And also she is stressed because she doesn't want to come out to her father, who she doesn't think will accept her for who she is, and that's just such a heart-wrenching thing that I feel like, you know, as a teenager, anybody who is gay or lesbian or non-binary in general is just very scary. And I think they do a really good job of expressing that fear and that stress and just the journey in general really well. I think it's really beautiful. I think I mentioned this before, to have so many really nice and diverse books available that were definitely not in the shelves when I was in high school or middle school. And I think it's just, I don't know, even though this book was not targeted towards me, I am 30 years old, I am, you know, a straight Hispanic woman, but still, like, it is, I don't know, it warms my heart to read these books that are so well done and do the plot so much justice, and just the story's very well told, and to see that it will help someone else who is, you know, around that age. And so that book, definitely so good. I was really happy to read it and be so impressed with how well it was written. So we hit our 24 books of 24, but I do want to do some honorable mentions, only because I went through my list again and I'm like, maybe I should mention them just in case. I'm just gonna speed through them really fast because this video is already so long. It's Behind the Camera by Chelsea Curto. I've mentioned this time and time again. It is a nanny and football player romance. It has characters from past books, characters from books that you would meet in the future, and no bad things to say about it. I loved everything about it. Then it's Every Summer After. I love that book as well. I feel like it is a great summer book. The way that she knows how to write scenes is just so beautiful. I can envision, I think it's called Edward Island or something like that in Canada. I looked it up. That place is gorgeous, and the way she writes about it, it just makes you want to go and visit and travel. And it is a dual timeline, follows one point of view, our main character who is best friends, these two brothers, and she goes to visit them every summer, and then something happens where it all stops. And then in the present, they are not friends anymore. So kind of like you try to, you know, read into it and try to figure out like what happened, what went wrong. Finally, I put The Perfect Fit by Claire Gilmore. I have a signed copy of that book and I am so ecstatic. I think it's so good. Anxiety representation, the feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of imposter syndrome is so good. The romance I really enjoyed. Learning to ask for help is so important, and I just, you know, I had to mention it. It was a great romance. One of the best romances I read of the year. And that's it. My video is so long, and I wasn't expecting to even do a 24 and 24 because choosing my favorite books of the year is the most stressful thing ever. I read because I enjoy to read books, and so ranking books is very challenging. Like I said, I did not mention these books in any particular order except for the honorable mentions. Those definitely came below the 24, but I read 150 books, so that does say something. And yeah, I don't know. Let me know. What did you read this year that made your top 24? Because there's definitely so many books I want to read, I want to get to in 2025, and maybe I'll do a video about that next, like 25 books I want to try to read in 25. If you're interested in that, let me know, because I would love to make it. And if not, that's fine too. If I feel like making it, I'll still make it. And so yeah, I guess we'll talk later, guys. This was a whole ride and a half, so we'll chat soon. Bye, guys.